My name is Scott Dabowski. I'm president of the American Friends of DVI. For those of you who don't know, DVI is a very, very special place. It's the Trudy Burger Clinic in Jerusalem, and it's really the only non-sectarian dental clinic that treats people at risk and people at need in Jerusalem, or probably in the whole Middle East. And as I said, it's a special place, and no one pays a penny to get treated. So we're here this evening to raise money and listen to a very, very funny guy, and the guy who's going to interview an old friend of mine, Michael Goldberg. And I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, what's interesting about tonight, they say you can't have your cake and eat it too. Well, for those dentists who are here tonight, you can laugh and get a credit of CE. So that's a very unusual thing. And, you can say that all dentists need a sense of humor just to get through dental school. But I think Jeff here has taken it to a much higher level, and he's got a dual path in his life between comedy and dentistry. And I think that's quite interesting. Michael Goldberg is going to interview him. Michael's a dear old friend of mine. He's been with DVI, American Friends of DVI, forever. He's a very, very, his heart is solely dedicated to American Friends, and I really appreciate all he's done. He brought me into American Friends of DVI. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael. An evening with Michael interviewing Jeff and getting some insights into how we can make our lives better. Thanks, and see you later.
Thank you, Scott. And I really appreciate using the terms old and forever. Thank you. That was great. So I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple of things that I would like to share with you about our guest. So first of all, a little bit more about the DVI clinic. Not only is it non-sectarian, but it's also the only place in Israel where a dentist can actually go and practice dentistry. The only place. And that's thanks to Trudy Burger, whose husband Zev was in the government and used his political pull to get us the freedom to get dentists licensed for the period of time when they're working in the clinic. So that is a unique feature of the DVI clinic. And I would be remiss if we didn't also discuss something that is very timely, as Holocaust Remembrance Day was last week, and Trudy wrote a book, A Daughter's Gift of Love, and it is a Holocaust memorial, and it's a great book. Not sure if it's still in print, but if it's not, I think we may have some extras at DVI. So this is our guest back in the day, and he'll talk more about that later on. And what Jeffrey's life and my life have paralleled one another in some really interesting ways. He started his dental career at Temple, and I'm finishing my dental career at Temple. And as you can tell, we shared stylists. So, and he lost the mustache, I added a beard. It's interesting, but we both practiced in the Bronx for a bit, and then we moved our practices to Manhattan. And I saw this back then, and it was a New York Times article about this guy, this dentist who wrote for comedians. And I can't tell you how envious I was of this guy. So this guy's known everybody. I mean, I recognize everybody here. I don't know if all of you recognize some of these people, but they are it's like the Borscht Belt in one picture. They're all here. And obviously he's moved on. And it's interesting that the only person that he's taller than is Kevin Hart. So I guess, Jeffrey, you probably wanted to hang out with Kevin Hart a little bit, but then he took his dental career and his comic career, and he brought them both together in a unique way. And I think what we really want to talk about tonight is Jeffrey's journey, because it's unique, from dentistry to comedian to author and healer. And with that, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Jeffrey Gurian.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's really great to be here with you, and really an honor to speak for a charity like DVI. You know, as dentists, we're used to taking away pain, but I have had dental pain and I know what that's like. And the thought of having to live with dental pain and not being able to afford to go to a dentist is a nightmare. It's a horrible thing. So it's a wonderful thing that DVI does to bring dental care to poor children and to indigent elderly people. So I'm honored to be on with you. Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. As Milton Berle would say, of all my introductions, that is definitely the most recent.
So the question is, did you write that line for him?
No, I wish I did. I wrote a lot of other stuff for him, but that line was his own. I just loved those kind of jokes. He was an amazing person.
But you did write for Milton, and you wrote for Henny Youngman.
Jerry Lewis. I wrote Henny Youngman's 89th birthday roast for television. And I got to know all those guys from the golden age of comedy. Milton Berle was my sponsor in the Friars Club. And that was one of my greatest honors, you know. Watching him as a kid on TV growing up, I couldn't believe that we were actually friends. I'd be on the phone with him and I'd be like, I'm thinking, I'm talking to Milton Berle and he knows who I am. And we would sit at the Friars Club and he would tell me about his teeth. He was having implants and spending so much money. In those days, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And,
Did he go to Lenny Linkow?
Probably. I don't remember who he went to, but
back then he's like one of the few guys that were doing it.
We're doing implants, exactly. So I'm sure he probably did, but it's been an amazing ride, and it's not over.
God willing. So can we talk a little bit about the journey? I know you started off as a child who stuttered.
Yeah, I started stuttering when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and it lasted through my 20s, even into my 30s. Even after I graduated from dental school, I was still blocking on certain words because my experience in dental school was so harrowing that they tried to take away. And I want to talk about that because it's not often I get a chance to tell my story to other dentists. So they'll probably appreciate this. But when I was 12 years old, I decided I wanted to be a dentist. I must have been a really weird kid. And I was, already writing comedy. And I knew I wanted to be a doctor of some kind, but I was a very sensitive child. I'm an empath. I didn't know that in those days. It's helped me a lot in working on patients, but it's a difficult life when you're so sensitive, you feel every single thing. I'm sensitive to weather, to the room I'm in, to colors, to sounds, just to everything. There was a time, if I was with you and you were sad, I was sadder for you than you were. I overfelt my feelings. So I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I knew I couldn't handle life and death situations. And I was wearing braces. And I said, you know what? I'll be an orthodontist and I'll make people look beautiful. And I was already writing comedy. And I used to stay up at night thinking, I want to be a dentist, but how can I combine these? Who ever heard of a dentist who writes comedy? It didn't even make sense. And I really used to think about that. And somehow I was able to combine them. So I was so excited to be a dentist. I got excited. I got accepted to 3 schools. Buffalo, the weather was too cold. Maryland, I don't know, something about it I didn't like. It was an older school. Temple sounded nice, like, because I used to go to Temple on the holidays. So I said, okay, I'll go to Temple. I'll go to Temple University. And I was expecting to be welcomed into the profession. You know, I thought that it was, I
You
just
thought there was going to
expected,
be, you thought there was going to be a kiddush after Temple.
exactly. And instead it turned into a 4-year fraternity hazing. The very first day, I'll never forget, you know, it's so funny. Sometimes you can't remember things that happened last week. These words are indelibly etched into my consciousness. The first day, the dean welcomed us with a speech. And he said, we don't want any free thinkers here. If you want to be a hippie with a guitar, go to dental school in California. And I already knew that I was in trouble. And from that day on, they singled me out and they made my life miserable. And that picture that you showed, I have it here because it's not on the screen anymore. This is what I looked like in dental school. That's how short my hair was. But I chose to grow a mustache and sideburns because that's what was happening at the time in New York, right? They went insane. They thought I was like a radical because I grew a mustache. So I was banned from clinic. I was banned from seeing patients for 3 weeks. Now, you know, in dental school, if you miss even a couple of days, that's rough because you have to get credits. So the head of Crown and Bridge, which was one of the most powerful, and I'm not mentioning names because they're gone already. They're gone. And I would love to mention their name because of what they did to me, but I won't. The head of Crown and Bridge had a Confederate flag in his office and a sign that said, "The South will rise again." And he wore his hair like it was dug out with a shovel. You couldn't get it short enough, you know? And he was the one who made my life miserable, along with the guy who ran the prosthetics department. The two of them band together and they told, don't give Gurian a chair. So for 3 weeks, I wasn't allowed to see patients because they wanted me to drop out. And my advisor, you know, they assign you an advisor. My advisor called me out in the hall one day and he said to me, I want you to know that you're a disgrace to the profession. Those were his words to a 22-year-old kid, you know, and they really tried to destroy me. They wanted me to drop out of school. My mother bought me a wig because my father came down and they wouldn't even let me work on my own father until they found out that he served in World War II. The guy from Crown and Bridge said, your dad served us well in World War II. Those were his words. So my mom bought me a wig, like a flat wig with a part, and they never knew it was a wig. And the guy from Crown and Bridge had me come to his office and I had to turn in a circle. How humiliating. Turn in a circle for him to examine me from every angle. And he said to me, now you can go back into the clinic after I had missed 3 weeks. So I had to work incredibly hard to make up the time. And, you know, not only was I not a disgrace to the profession, I graduated number 54 out of 126. So I worked really hard. And on the day they gave me my diploma, one of those guys said to me, as he handed me my diploma, he said, Gurian, get a haircut. And they tortured me. And I left Philadelphia and I vowed I would never go back. And I never had anything to do with the school. So to show you how crazy life is, just before the pandemic, I get an email from the dean of Temple University. And he says, I want to know if you would meet me for lunch. And I assumed that they were contacting me to ask for a donation because I never had anything to do with the school. And I was about to say no, but one of the things that I do in my life is I challenge myself to do everything that makes me uncomfortable. I write books about stuff like that. And I said to myself, you know what? This could be an opportunity. You should meet with this dean and tell him your story. I wanted to tell him how badly I was treated and how it affected my self-esteem and my self-confidence, which is why I was still stuttering. Because as a young kid, when people tell you that you're going to be a failure and you'll never amount to anything because they don't like the fact that you have sideburns, if they had seen your beard, they would have thrown you out of school. There was no way. So I agreed to meet with him. He came with another dean and they took me out to this beautiful lunch. And I came with pictures, and I had written a screenplay about my experience. It was called Almost Cut My Hair, after the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song, if you remember, right? Almost Cut My Hair was like a theme song of theirs. And I started telling my story, and I'll mention his name because he's a wonderful guy. Dean Ahmed Ismail is the new dean. He was not the dean when I was there. He's been a dean there for about 10 years. And he interrupted me in the middle of my story. And he said, I want you to know they were racist and anti-Semites. And they picked on a lot of people. He goes, I happen to know that you were the worst. And he said he'd been reading about me in the paper and online. And he wanted to meet me because he said that I was one of the most accomplished graduates that they ever had. And he wanted to come and meet me. And I was so happy that I had the courage to go and meet him. And at the end, he said, do you mind if I give you a hug? And I said, that's fantastic. Absolutely. So I said, but we have to take a picture together. So I have a picture of me and Dean Ismail and another dean on the other side of me. And it's hilarious because
I don't know if you know
this.
I don't know if you know this, Jeffrey.
But
I became friendly with Dean Ismail probably in 2014 or 15. We actually traveled to Israel together. And I have a picture with the dean, myself, and the staff of DVI at the DVI clinic.
Well, he's a wonderful human being. And he said to me, we've completely changed the whole atmosphere of the school. We would never allow that anymore. Those guys are all gone. He goes, I would never allow somebody to be treated that way. When we were learning to give local anesthetic, you learn on a patient. And I was so, one thing that was very important to me always was to give painless injections. And I used a lot of topical, and I had the needle in the patient's gingiva. And one of the instructors came by and hit my arm like that, put it in further, just like that. Today, that would be considered assault. That's how they treated me in those days. So I was left like broken. I really, it took a long time for me to build up the confidence. And so Dean Ismail, since that time, he hired me to do a series of weekly lectures to the doctors, to the faculty. He said, I want you to speak about changing frustration to enjoyable and hate to love. And then he had me do a comedy show for the whole faculty and the staff for Christmas. And we've become amazing friends. And he said to me, could you ever believe that that story would end that way from what happened to you years ago? And it's very meaningful to me because you never know what's going to happen in life. Life can take very strange turns. And
so speaking of strange turns,
yeah,
how did you turn that into a successful dental practice? And how did that turn into writing comedy for all these comedians?
In my junior year of dental school, I met Woody Allen. I couldn't come home for the first 2 years. There was too much work. But there were only 3 people in life that I ever wanted to meet: Woody Allen, Salvador Dali, and the Beach Boys. And I made sure that I met them all. But Woody Allen was my comedy idol in those days. And so on the rare occasions that I could come home to New York to visit, I didn't have any money in those days. So I borrowed my dad's car, and he was starring in a show called Play It Again, Sam, with Tony Roberts, who was his favorite co-actor. He was on Broadway. And I decided I needed to go see him. So I would stop by the theater and I would leave my dental school card. And on the back of my dental school card, I would write a note as if I already knew him. And I would say, Woody, it's Jeffrey. I haven't seen you in a long time, and I'm coming to the show. And I would write very strange things like, I'm bringing my cardboard thumb. I don't know why I would write things like that, but because he had a very unusual sense of humor. And so I was leaving these cards over a period of months, always on the back of my dental school card. So finally, I saved up enough money for a ticket. And I realized, listen, if I go to see this guy, I have to prove that I'm sane, right? Because when you're going to meet a big star, they're not really waiting at the theater to meet strangers, So I said, well, how am I going to prove that I'm sane? So I figured out there's only two ways to prove you're sane. You either wear a tie like you're wearing, or you bring a pretty girl with you. And I didn't have a tie. And I only knew one pretty girl, and she hated me because we had just broke up. But I begged her. She knew that my dream was to meet Woody Allen. And I begged her, I said, please just come with me, because I didn't have any confidence because they were beating me down in school. I had like zero confidence. I thought it was who I had on my arm that was important. I didn't realize that I could stand up for myself. So I thought I had to bring somebody special. So anyway, we show up at the show, and I was so naive about show business that I didn't know you wait till the end of the show. I thought I'm going to go during intermission. So I drop off my final dental school card and I say, Woody, I'm here and I'm going to come back to see you during intermission. Intermission comes and I'm in a panic. I'm really nervous. And she goes, you can't back out. I came with you. You have to go. So I go to the stage door. Now, there's no terrorism in those days. So there's no security. Nobody cares. So I walk in. The stage manager is not in his chair. I grab her hand. We run up the stairs, but I wind up on the roof. I went the wrong way. So I come back down and the stage manager's there. And he says to me, can I help you? And I said, yes, Woody is expecting me. He says, go right in. So I go to Woody's dressing room and he's not there. He's in Tony Roberts' dressing room with the whole cast. And I remember this like it was yesterday. And I'm nervous. And she goes, you have to do this. You cannot back out. I go up to the room. Woody's sitting on a couch across the room. And I look in and I go like this to him, like a little kid. And he goes, me? And I go, yeah, you. And he comes over and he's holding my dental school card. And he says to me, you must be Jeff. And I was so excited. I started saying ridiculous things. I started saying like, let's open up a day camp and throw winter clothes at people. I said, let's walk low like we used to in Europe. And he looks at the girl, he goes, this guy's an effing nut. He goes, and I realized I was overexcited. I was like a kid meeting my idol, you know? So I calmed down and I said, listen, I write comedy and everybody says that what I write is just like what you write. And I wanted to meet you. And he said, well, listen, I'm right in the middle of a show. Do you think you could come back tomorrow night? I said, I'm sorry, I'm much too busy. No, I didn't say that. No, I said, of course I'll come back tomorrow night. Yeah. So I had to beg the same girl 2 nights in a row. And it was pouring rain. And I borrow my dad's car again. And I drive back. Woody sits with me for an hour, a whole hour in his dressing room after the show. And he reads all my stuff. And my dream was he was going to say, Jeffrey, let's make movies together. He didn't say that. He said, your comedy is very visual. And you should really think of making a film out of it, which I did. A few years later, I took those ideas and I made a series of films for the Toyota Comedy Festival. And they were called the Men Who series. It was about men who do very unusual things, like men who take a pitchfork to the movies, men who enjoy Latin dancing with tools. I'm sure you've seen guys dancing with tools. I had a guy who did the tango with a wrench. That was unbelievable. And in one of my films, it was called Men Who Dance Where They're Not Supposed to. And the star of that film went on to become one of the biggest stars in the world. Peter Dinklage, the star of Game of Thrones, was dancing in a no dancing zone. I had my artist draw. It was an exact replica of a no parking sign, but this said no dancing Tuesday and Thursday or any other time. And Peter Dinklage gets arrested for dancing in a no dancing zone. Who knew years later he'd become one of the biggest stars in the world? So after that, when I graduated from school, I decided I needed to get connected to Saturday Night Live, because Saturday Night Live was a new show. And I said, so I started making films on the street. And I was doing crazy stories like several men were arrested for smearing cream cheese on the ankles of elderly women who wore their stockings rolled down like bagels. You ever see the old women? Old Jewish women always have their stockings rolled down. It looked like bagels to me. So I went to my dear grandmother, who didn't have a Jewish accent at all. She made believe she had a Jewish accent. And she said to me, you know, in the Jewish religion, we have two kinds of stockings, one for milk and one for meat. She goes, and this crazy man, he smeared cream cheese on my meat stockings and I can't get it off. And I zoom in with the camera and I get the cream cheese on her ankles. That's how sick I was to get my own grandmother. my dear grandmother to put cream cheese on her ankles. And she had such a great sense of humor because she and my grandfather owned a nightclub growing up. So they were show business people. So she loved the idea that I was involved in show business in some way, or that I wanted to break into show business. And I did another series of those films called The Masters of Disguise. And The Masters of Disguise was two criminals who disguised themselves as inanimate objects to commit their crimes. So it started with two men disguised as coats, rob a hat store. They come in over the arms of two other men, and they say, just act natural, like wear your coats and nobody will get hurt. And the police draw a composite drawing of the perpetrators, and it's two coats. And then I did one called, I used a famous dentist in this. Well, not a famous dentist, a well-known oral surgeon. I did a special called Prominent Businessmen Who Wear Swim Fins to the Office. And Joel Friedman, who has been, he's an officer, he's a well-known oral surgeon.
So Joel actually lived on the same floor in the apartment building I lived in.
Well, he's a very dear friend for so many years.
Good friend.
My dental office was right near his, and he was always my oral surgeon. So he played the part of a cardiac surgeon, and we snuck into Einstein Hospital at night with a whole crew of people, and we took over an operating room and made believe that we were doing heart surgery. And I bust in the middle of the surgery, and I introduced myself. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm doing a story. I said, is it true that you wear swim fins during surgery? And he walks away from the surgery, and he's got these huge swim fins, and he gives me this great interview on why it's important to wear swim fins during surgery. So I have these films, and I decide I got to get up to Saturday Night Live. Now, I'm driving a car in those days that could only be described as a pimp mobile. And I sent you a picture of it. I don't have it here, but you have it. It was a Mandarin orange Eldorado, a Cadillac Eldorado, the first car I ever bought for myself. And it was made for one of the Isley brothers. And he decided not to take it. And so I went to this place in the Bronx, and I asked for a car, and they said, we have this one car, it's a Mandarin orange Eldorado. I'll take it, I said. So I put a Rolls Royce grill on it, and it had doctor's plates, it had DDS plates. Only hookers drove cars like that, and pimps. And so my wife was like, we're Jewish and we live in Scarsdale. Why am I driving an orange Cadillac? She never got it, you know, she couldn't get it. So I drove that car to Saturday Night Live, and I pulled up in front of the building, because in those days, again, there was no terrorism. You could pull right up to 30 Rock. And I know some of the people on this webinar are probably not from New York, but Saturday Night Live gets shot at a building called 30 Rockefeller Center. And these days, you can't get anywhere near the building. They closed it all in. But in those days, you could pull right up to the front. And I threw the doorman a few bucks, and I said, watch my car. Lorne Michaels is expecting me. Lorne Michaels is the producer and the creator of Saturday Night Live. I get up to Saturday Night Live. I sneak past security, and as the door opens, I meet Alan Zweibel, who has gone on to become an award-winning producer, director, writer, very famous. But in those days, he's a young kid. He's one of the head writers on Saturday Night Live, and he's playing handball on the wall with Neil Levy, who is Lorne Michaels' cousin, also a producer on the show. I introduce myself and I tell him about my films, and he watches the films and he goes, these are amazing. I never saw anything like this. To this day, he remembers cream cheese on the ankles. He says he can't get it out of his mind after all these years. So he did one of the nicest things for me. He called his manager. He didn't just give me the name. He called his manager, a man named David Jonas, who was managing Freddie Prinze at the time, the original Freddie Prinze from Chico and the Man. And he said, I have this guy. He goes, don't let it bother you that he's a dentist, but he's very funny, and you should watch his films. And I met with him, and he tried to talk me out of it for a year. He's like, you're a doctor. What do you need this for? This is crazy. You don't want to be in this business. But I wouldn't listen to him. So he was representing not only Freddie Prinze, but all the comedians from Catskills on Broadway. And that's how I got started writing jokes. It took me about a year to learn how to craft a joke, because I'm thinking cream cheese on the ankles, and you can't do that on stage. It's funny on video, but that's not a joke. You can't do it. So I had to learn how to write a joke. So it took me about a year. And because of writing for his guys, that's how I got to meet Rodney Dangerfield. And he started doing my jokes on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And he was the first really big star that I ever wrote for. And from that point, that's where my career took off, because then I became what they call an industry name. When you're writing for somebody like Rodney and he's doing your stuff with Johnny Carson, people get to know your name. And that's what kicked it off. So that's a long answer to your story. To your question.
So I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
First of all, what happened to the woman who made you go and meet Woody Allen?
We dated for a long time. I think we broke up while I was in dental school. It was a very traumatic thing for me, but I'm in touch with her today. I'm in touch with a lot of people from my past. You know, I've learned never to have resentments against people. You know, one of the books that I write books on happiness. And one of the most important things is to not have resentments. Resentment is like you taking poison, expecting the other person to die. So I had to go through very painful things in my life, as has everyone. I went through a divorce, but now I see my ex-wife and her husband, and we get together for the holidays. I have dinner at their house, which used to be my house, a very beautiful house, by the way. And all our children get together. We have a very big extended family because of certain spiritual principles that I write about, but I also incorporate into my own life, because it's very important to do that. I honor her as the mother of my children. She gave me the greatest gift that anyone could give anyone. And I try and tell that to people. Like when I lecture, when I'm on the radio, or when I do a talk, I always talk about that, because so many people break up and they hate each other. And you know what? If you didn't have children, you never have to see each other. But if you love your children, they couldn't be those children unless it was that other person's DNA. And so I'm grateful to her forever because of that. And so I always appreciate being able to talk about that.
So the other question I have is from someone who was beaten down and had a lack of self-esteem. How do you manage to get up on a stage in front of people?
That's a great question. And you know what? When I stopped stuttering, in order to stop stuttering, I had to learn to control my mind. And I'll tell you that story quickly because it's tied in with everything else I do. I realized one day that I didn't stutter when I was alone. When I went to college, I made myself run for the president of the freshman class. And it was a very big college, 7 high schools fed into it. And I told myself that if I could win the election, I wouldn't have to stutter anymore, because it would tell me that people like me. Because if people don't like you, they're not going to vote for you. So I won the election, and I was the president of the freshman class of Hunter College. And it was a great lesson for me, because it taught me that outside validation doesn't work in life. It doesn't matter how many people tell you you're fantastic and wonderful and talented and fabulous. It matters what you think of yourself. And that started me on a journey of self-exploration. And I realized one day that I didn't stutter when I was alone, which is true for a lot of stutterers. When now as an avocation, I work with stutterers all over the world to teach them how not to stutter. But the main question I ask them is, can you speak better when you're by yourself? And if they say yes, I tell them, well, you can't have a disability based on your location. A man with a limp limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could speak fine when I'm alone, then theoretically it means that there's nothing wrong with me. So I took that knowledge and I consider it grace. And I don't know if you're familiar with the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the most important line, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I was granted the wisdom to know that I was not powerless over stuttering. And I worked on myself for years. I created a treatment using affirmations, using thought. The power of the mind is so powerful. And I was determined that I was not going to go through my whole life as a stutterer, because people are afraid enough of a dentist. A stuttering dentist is not going to work. You know what I mean? And so I was convinced that I couldn't go through my life that way. And as you can see, I no longer stutter. It took me years because I had no one to help me. I had to work on it by myself, but I released myself from the bondage of stuttering. And when it came time to get on stage, it took me a long time, but that's what led to my book, Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way, because I battle fear all the time. And I had to tell myself, if other people can do it, I have to be able to do it as well. You know, I did that
this
with
is
many things. Go ahead.
This I think is really important to probably most of the people who are watching, many of whom are dentists, have dental practices. And as a consultant, which is what I do now, I deal with practice owners and leadership. And one of the things that you said rang true to me, and that is, we are stuck, many of us are stuck with invalid thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And the invalid thoughts cause bad decisions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up. It's the reason that I wrote my first book. It's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. We're all holding invalid thoughts. My invalid thoughts caused me to stutter. They gave me low self-esteem. They told me that I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. All of our invalid thoughts come from our subconscious mind. From the time we're children, every time someone hurts your feelings, hurts you in any way, breaks a promise to you, breaks up with you in a relationship, you hold that inside of you in your heart chakra. I call them heart wounds. And they stay for your whole life, and they affect every decision you make. They affect your self-esteem and your self-confidence, because every time you're called upon in your life to make a decision, you think about what to do. You use your thoughts. Who else's thoughts can you use but your own? You think about what to do. And if some of your thoughts are invalid, if they're negative against yourself, because of these old things that you're carrying with you, your decisions are not going to work out for you. So it's the reason why we see these patterns in our life. We get the same bad job over and over again, the same bad relationship that doesn't work out. And the only common denominator is you. You're the one who keeps showing up in all these things. All the other people are different. So it's very important, and it's very difficult to examine your own thoughts, to see what thoughts am I holding that are not valid for me, that are usually they're negative against yourself, and they tell you that you can't accomplish the things you want to accomplish, because fear is a bully, and you have to stand up to the fear. And that's what I've been doing my whole life, to the point where in 2019, I made myself go to Japan all alone, because it was the scariest thing I could think of to do. And I made it for 2 weeks, and I spoke the little Japanese that I knew, and I have fears of getting lost. So I went 14 hours on a plane, and I was lost literally every day in Japan, because the subway system is so difficult. But I never let it stop me, Michael. I went on the subway every day. I went to different cities. I performed in 2 comedy shows while I was there.
In Japanese?
No, in English. There's a lot of expats. I was nervous. I thought I'd be performing for Japanese people. So I was I was prepared to perform for Japanese people, but they're all expats from England and every place where they speak English.
So let me fast track here to.
Since I stopped stuttering, you can't stop me from talking. So just jump in whenever you want.
So what I love is that you've taken all of this and you've connected the dots. And can you tell us how that impacts how you think about the master joint?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I spent 12 years at NYU as a clinical professor in oral medicine and orofacial pain. And my specialty was always TMJ. When I went to dental school, I thought I had lockjaw from the stress. The stress was unbelievable. And anybody who's been through dental school knows what it was like, but mine was 10 times because of what they were doing to me. I woke up in the morning, I could hardly open my mouth. And I didn't know that I was clenching and grinding my teeth. And in those days, they used the occlusal equilibration. They were grinding down my contacts, which made it much worse. I didn't know where to close. I was moving my jaw like a coke addict. I was like, it was crazy. So some genius told me about a soft night guard, and that saved me. And so I was always, that was a focus of mine, because from the last 3 years, we've all been living with so much stress. And I'll tell my COVID story too. I was in the hospital with COVID double pneumonia, and just crazy stuff happened. But a lot of my dentist friends tell me that they see so many patients with cracked teeth, broken fillings. People are grinding like crazy because it's a very common habit to do when you're under stress. And so when I was at NYU, in 1999, I was accepted to the board of the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy. And I approached this group of psychotherapists. They were formed by a guy named Henry Grayson, who was a doctor who formed the National Institute of the Psychotherapies. And I approached him as a dentist, and I said, I'm not a classically trained psychotherapist, although all dentists are really psychologists also, we know that. And I said to him, you're treating people who are emotionally damaged, they're depressed, they're suffering with emotional illness, but you're overlooking the physical symptoms. You have to approach it with a body, mind, spirit approach. I said, a lot of people who are clenching and grinding their teeth are depressed, and they have physical symptoms like migraine type headaches, neck pain, shoulder pain, facial pain. Their teeth are moving. I said, you can't cure someone of depression when their head is hurting. You need to know these physical symptoms that come from stress. They loved my work and they accepted me on the board, and I spent 20 years on the board, and I wound up lecturing at energy psychology conferences. And when I was at NYU, they saw me taking away headaches just using my hands, just the energy from my hands, releasing the muscles intraorally and extraorally. And so I got a call one day from the head of oral medicine, a wonderful woman named Joan Phelan, who unfortunately has left us.
No, Joan.
And she called.
Joan was originally a hygienist.
I think so, right.
I you know that. I know Joan because she was up at Columbia also.
Well, she called me to her office, and I thought I was in trouble from my dental school days. Anytime someone calls you a doctor in dental school, you know you're in trouble. When they say, doctor, come up to the board, you know you're in trouble, right? So Joan calls me to the office, and I'm expecting I'm going to get fired for something. And she said, you know what? We're underutilizing you. I see what you're doing in the clinic, and you should really be teaching that. We should try and get a budget for you to teach how to take away headaches, because my belief is that dentists should be treating headaches. And not enough dentists ask as part of their medical history, when you wake up in the morning, does your neck hurt? Because if a patient wakes up in the morning and their neck hurts, the last person in the world they would think to tell would be their dentist. Why would you ever tell your dentist that your neck hurts? It wouldn't even occur to them. So people take the information available to them and they make an excuse that makes sense to them. So they think, my pillow's no good, my mattress is no good, I slept in a funny position, I did too much exercise at the gym, because you can't know what you don't know. You can't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, my splenius capitis muscles are sore. It must be my temporomandibular joint, because you don't have that information on your hard drive, right? So she had me do a lecture to the faculty on what I do. And then Michael Gelb, who I know that you know and have worked with, Michael Gelb was the head of TMJ, and he had me do a treatment on him. And he said, that's so great. It's so interesting, you know, because he's all about appliances and stuff, but I'm all about energy. And then he had me lecture to his postgraduate students on my STAR therapy, you know, the STAR, which is an acronym. It's an acronym for Spiritual Transformational Affirmative Resonance Therapy.
I have a slide on that, but this is so interesting, I think.
Well,
let's switch gears a little bit,
go ahead.
because we do want to keep on entertaining everybody.
Sure.
I would like to know what confuses you.
Oh, we're leaving that already. Okay, a lot of things.
We'll go back. We'll come back to it.
A lot of things confuse me, Michael. You know what confused me? So many things confuse me. Like, don't you hate it when you wake up in the morning and you're really in the mood to vote and there's no election? What do you do in a case like that, right? How do you take away that urge to cast a ballot? And you know that night when you're supposed to turn your clocks ahead an hour at 2 a.m.? What are you supposed to meet somebody at 2 a.m.? What time do you show up, right? At 1:59, you're still a minute early. 1 minute later, you're an hour late. You can't do it. It's not possible to do it. You know, so many things confuse me. You never see an infant that looks familiar to you. You never hear anybody say, you see that infant over there? I could swear I know him from somewhere. You never hear that. So, oh God, so many things confuse. I'm glad you asked, because so many things confuse. You know what confuses me? The headbutt. The headbutt totally confused. How come only the guy receiving the headbutt gets hurt and not the guy using his head like a freaking hammer? You know, what is there, some secret agreement in the headbutt community that only one guy gets hurt at a time? Giving someone a headbutt makes no sense. It's like shooting yourself, hoping to get the guy behind you, you know? And I'll tell you the last thing. Well, let me tell you this first. Pants are important. I have no material in that. I just thought I'd let you know.
Thank you.
No, I do have material. I want to talk about ripped jeans.
By the way, Jeffrey, I'm not wearing any, just so you know.
Well, that's what you can get away with on Zoom. But ripped jeans, what's the story with ripped jeans, Michael? Ripped jeans, why are jeans the only article of clothing you could wear in such bad shape and completely get away with it? There's no other article of clothing you could wear in such horrible condition and get away with it. You can't show up in a torn shirt, a ripped dress, a suit with holes in the knees, but jeans could be ripped to shreds and people love them. I saw a girl last week just wearing pockets. That's all that was left, just pockets. Both legs were completely gone, $1,000, right? The truth is that ripped jeans are basically torn pants. That's all they are. If you went into a store and you saw a sign that said torn pants, the chances are you'd pass it up. You don't want torn pants. Yeah, torn pants sounds like it's an accident. If you fall in the street and accidentally tear your pants, you go home to change. But if you're wearing ripped jeans, now it's time to go to the club, right? So anyway, let me end on this. Doing comedy.
You're not ending. We have 10 more minutes.
No, I just want to tell you, doing comedy on Zoom. Doing comedy on Zoom is like standing on a highway and yelling out jokes to passing cars. That's how effective it is. It's like, hey, have you heard this one? Zoom. I think that's where they got the name Zoom from. You know, when you do comedy, you want to get some response from the audience. At least I see you. Thank God you're laughing. Yeah, I'm just hoping the people at home are laughing. Otherwise, you don't know. It's like it could go either way.
It is. It's really hard. So
comedy takes away stress. It's true that it's.
So let's talk a little bit about stress, because I know that's a big topic for you, and it's a big topic for everybody today. I'll tell you a little story. So Dr. Tom Frieden was the head of the CDC from 2009 and 2000 to 2017. And Tom was a patient of mine since he was a resident at Columbia, always came back from Atlanta to New York and comes into my office. He's always busy, but comes in as a patient and he asks me, do you have a room where I can go and be alone? I said, you need to make a phone call, go into my office and make a phone call. He says, no. I haven't meditated yet today. And meditation was not on my radar as a stress relieving technique back then, but it is now. And I know that you do a lot of things with regard to stress relief, including some guided meditation.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And I had a great story that I started using music in my guided meditation. Star therapy that I mentioned, spiritual transformational affirmative resonance therapy. The resonance refers to my voice because I speak the whole time I do it. When I'm taking away headaches from people, I'm taking them through a guided meditation, basically. And I'm using music. And I've been doing that for more than 30 years. And I was using music by a man that was created by a man named Stephen Halpern. Stephen Halpern is credited as the father of New Age music. He lives in California. And as a young dentist, I was doing this, and I wrote him a letter to tell him how important his music was, his healing music. Music is absorbed by the second chakra. We're all very sensitive. We're more sensitive than we realize. If you're listening to certain types of music, it can make you very upset. Certain types of music can make you feel very relaxed. So I was using his music, and I wanted him to know how helpful it was to people, because I used to keep a book of letters of people that I cured their headaches, doing this work and having them wear a soft night guard in conjunction with it. And I never heard from him. I wrote him a letter, and I never heard back from him. Just before the pandemic, one day, I get a message on my machine. He said, "Hi, I'm calling in reference to a letter that you sent me 20 years ago." It turns out it was Stephen Halpern. He had never seen the letter. He was working on, he's in his 70s now, he's working on his memoirs, and he was looking through files, and he found my letter. Today, just today, Michael, he wrote to me today that he found the original, and he's going to send it to me, because he's an artist. He's scattered. He didn't know where it was. He saw it and contacted me and then lost it again immediately. But literally today, he just told me, "I found all 3 pages of what you sent me, and he's going to send it to me." And so he said to me that he was so moved by what I wrote that he wanted to track me down. And luckily, my number hasn't changed in all these years. And he said, "I want to put music to your words. Send me one of your guided meditations, and I'll put music to it." And I wrote something called Journey to Your Heart, because all healing comes from the heart. I had a healing center, and it was called the Happiness Center, because my goal is always to put out positive energy to the universe, whether I'm making people laugh or making them beautiful or taking away their pain. In some way, I always want to put out healing energy. And so he put beautiful music to my words, and it's on his website now, and it's called Journey to Your Heart with music by Stephen Halpern. Another thing that I would never guess could happen in my life, that I would have a project with someone that I revere like Stephen Halpern. And now we talk all the time. And he's a character, he's an amazing talent. And just to think that I have, a thing with him, and on the cover is me doing healing work. It shows my hands. I think you have a slide.
I do.
These are my books. That was me with Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson.
I mean, so this is the star therapy you were talking about. You also have these flow charts. Would it be okay if we gave these to people if they asked?
Yes, I don't mind at all. Absolutely. And also everybody who's attending this is going to get a copy of my happiness book, my first happiness book. I have a series, the happiness series, but the one with the meditating dog. And have you got any idea how hard it is to get a dog to sit in lotus position? It's almost impossible, Michael. But everyone who attends this webinar is going to get a copy of my Healing Your Heart book, which is a really important book to me. It's got about 350, mostly 5-star reviews. People say that it's life-changing. And as a matter of fact, that Know We Well thing, a dentist in Georgia contacted me out of nowhere. And I love these things when they happen. She sent me an email, and she said that my book helped her recover from very serious heart surgery. Not because my book says healing your heart. It's not about heart disease. It's about the heart wounds that we all carry that give us invalid thoughts. And so she had me lecture. She was involved with this women's healthcare group called Know We Well. And she said, "I want to invite you to speak to this group." And I was so moved by that, because it's so interesting that you never know what your words can do for somebody. You never know who needs to hear what you're saying. It could be something so simple to you, but it could be life-changing to somebody else.
So I just put up a couple of websites. I think the jeffreygurian.com website is great.
Thank you. And if people know anybody who stutters, please have them look at the Stop Stuttering Now Gurian website, because people who stutter are not being told that they can get better. And it's very disturbing to me. They're being told to accept their stuttering. And again, acceptance is only for things you can't change. And as you can see, if I could stop stuttering, other people could do it. That's my meditation with Stephen Halpern, my guided meditation, Journey to Your Heart. And again, one of my greatest honors, being able to work with a Grammy-nominated musician like Stephen Halpern, and to become a friend of his, which I never ever. It's like being friends with Dean Ismail. I never thought that could happen.
I don't know. I happen to be friends with a bunch of deans, so it's I never thought that would happen.
It's not my circle though.
And I never thought that I would get to meet the guy who I saw written about in the paper, who was a dentist and who wrote for comedians. So you have made one of my dreams come true. So thank you for getting involved. I really appreciate that. If any of you have any questions, we have a couple of minutes, and I would love if you I'm
willing to stay on. I don't mind. I have the time. I always love to take questions from people. And I want to thank you for being such a good host and for being so knowledgeable. And I didn't know that you had seen the New York Times story about me. You never told me that. You were saving that as a secret, but that's so fun that you saw that and that you remember it all these years.
I'm telling you, so Joel Friedman started a study club in the Bronx, and we met oftentimes in his office in the park in
Riverdale.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the building.
It was at 235th and Henry Hudson Parkway. But was he wearing swim fins when you met?
He was not wearing swim fins, and I'm still friendly with him on Facebook. We talk every once in a while.
Ask him about the swim fins. I'm sure he'll remember.
So at this, it was at this study club that we were talking about this dentist down the hill, because I think your office.
Yes, I was down the hill. Yeah,
down the hill, who's writing for Rodney Dangerfield and Milton Berle, and
I wrote for Joan Rivers. I did a book with Chris Rock. I produced Kevin Hart in a big benefit for Haiti after the earthquake.
So tell us a funny story about one of the comedians.
Oh, that's such a hard question because I know them all. I don't even know. I wouldn't even know where to start. I've just been blessed to get to meet everybody. If they look on my, I don't like it to sound obnoxious, but if you go to comedymatterstv.com and you see my website, you'll see me with everybody from Jimmy Fallon, Jerry Seinfeld, Amy Schumer, Amy Poehler, even women not named Amy are on there. It's like, I've had the chance to meet and work with everybody in comedy, at the last Just for Laughs festival. I go every year. It's the biggest comedy festival in the world in Montreal every year. And they have me interview all the big stars on the red carpet. That's what I do. And last year, Amy Schumer got the Comedy Person of the Year award, and she wouldn't talk to anybody but me. She skipped the whole thing. She goes, only Jeffrey. And we did a video interview together.
So watch this.
A lot of people don't know that one of the, for the last 75 years in comedy, modern stand-up, one of the only consistent things is Jeffrey's hair. For the last, 50 years now, this hair has been in comedy rooms and, comedy events, festivals, and everybody always says the same thing. Who the fuck is that guy? And I tell you, it's an honor and a pleasure to speak to this hair and this head.
Jeffrey, wonderful to see you. I skipped every other interview. I came straight to here.
If you don't know Jeffrey, then you're probably not a comedian. You're not really a comedian.
You're almost like a genetic marker for comedians. They go, do you know Jeffrey Gurian? No, you're not a real comic.
I'm envious of Jeff.
Righteous.
It's a righteous thing, man. It really is. Jeff is amazing.
You don't know who Jeffrey Gurian is, and you've seen someone where you're like, who the fuck is that? That's Jeffrey Gurian.
It's amazing even to me. Yeah.
Amazing journey, Jeffrey, really. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your journey, your smiles, and so that we can help make some smiles in Jerusalem. That's what it's all about.
That would be such a wonderful thing.